Hi, I'm MartinJarvis, and once again I want to welcome you to another perspective. Today we're going to talk about success, how to become successful. How, if you're struggling or if you're at a place of two roads meet and you're wondering what to do and how to do it, and it's not looking too positive, we're gonna get there. That's what we're going to discuss today. How to be successful. Whatever you're putting your hands to do, whatever it is your heart's desire, of course, as long as it's reasonable, how to become successful at it. And I'm going to use a couple of Bible verses that have been used in such a way that it's not really beneficial to the parishioners. It's the concept of sowing and reaping and prosperity. What is prosperity? What we have used as prosperity as far as an example is how I can get rich, how I can make money. Because money answers all things and all that. But there's an old saying, that it is better to teach a man to fish than it is to give him one. Because if you give a man to fish, that fish you gave him is going to be gone once it's consumed. But if you teach a man to fish, he'll always have fish, okay? And so as long as we're looking, from a spiritual perspective or a religious perspective, and how can I get a fish? Or I need somebody to give me a fish. We're not really, we're viewing that as prosperity, and that is good. I mean, if somebody walks up to me and gives me $10,000, I mean, that's pretty prosperous. But what I want to share with you is a way to walk in prosperity, is a way to walk in such a way that you don't need that miracle. Because to me, prosperity isn't having a windfall and having a lump sum of money fall in your lap, or somebody walking up and giving you $5,000 or so. I mean, that's wonderful, don't get me wrong. But that's not prosperity. Prosperity is living in such a way that you don't need somebody to walk up and give you that money. Okay, to me, when you're striving and struggling for miracle after miracle or prosperity after prosperity, situations coming to you, it's sort of like going to AA. All right, and I take issue with AA, although AA is done very well in people's lives and all. What I see AA is doing is just affirming to the individual that they're not well, that they're still addicted, that they're not delivered. Okay, so if I walk every day up every day and say I am an alcoholic, but this is my 10th day of being sober, I'm simply validating the fact and affirming the fact and strengthening the psychological and subconscious fact to me that I'm still an alcoholic, rather than realizing that I am no longer anymore an alcoholic, and that's why I don't need that drink. I see it in the same way even in our prayer life, okay, in our meditation life. And so I'm praying every day for say, God to give me this deliverance, or God help me in this, or help me in that. And then the next day I'm praying for the same thing. God, give me deliverance. God, help me in this. God, help me in that. And for the next week, every day, that's what I'm praying, because we're told to pray without ceasing, right? But there is a wisdom in the prayers that we should be praying. There is a strategic way to pray. And for me, coming the next day after I've just prayed for a thing, praying for the same thing, and then the next day the same thing again, all I'm really affirming or reaffirming to myself day by day is that it hasn't happened. Okay, and the definition of faith per Scripture is what? It's the evidence of things not seen. Is believing in such a thing that it has happened even though you don't see the manifestation of it yet. That's what faith is. So each day, if I'm asking for the same thing over and over again, I'm not convinced that it's already happened. I'm convinced that it hasn't happened. Every day it hasn't happened. And that's more of a detractor to faith than it is for a builder of faith. The builder of faith is to pray for a thing one day, and the next day, thank God for it, even though you don't see the evidence of it, because you know by faith that it's there. And then the next day, be thankful again that it's happened. And this right here is the positive of having that right mindset, because you're believing that it's a thing. You're believing that you're delivered. You're successful. You're not depending on someone to give you something as a handout. You're successful in and of yourself, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And so we're going to use two scriptures that have to do with sowing and reaping, because I believe this is where the confusion is. This is the confusion that the church has bought into, that parishioners have bought into, that preachers and pastors and evangelists, teachers have bought into, that has caused the congregation to be like that AA guy, to really believe that they're poor and that they have this pressing need. And if I just do this, I'll get that. But they spend all of their lives doing this and getting that. And every so often something comes in and they're believing it's because of what they did here. And maybe it was somewhat. But to me, I see the AA guy, the alcoholic guy that's maybe 20 days sober. And I don't know if I'm going to fail tomorrow, but what I do know is I'm not going to fail today. That's not the right attitude. No, you're not an alcoholic. No, you are successful. And so you're not looking for, just if I can make it through today. You're looking to make sure that you are well, to embrace that you are well. And oftentimes it's a matter of mindset. And when it comes to Scripture, it's a matter of looking at the same Scripture, but looking at it just a little bit different. Is it a Scripture that's going to keep me feeling like I am functioning in a particular type of prosperity, but I'm always in need? Or is the Scripture that's going to show me that I am living a life that's always prosperous and I don't need that momentary miracle, in my life? And that's what we're going to talk about. And the two scriptures we're going to use about sowing and reaping. And one is found in the book of Mark, the 4th chapter. And we're going to turn to it right now. I believe it's the first verse. Mark 4, first verse. Well, actually, we'll start in the 3rd verse. This is Jesus talking, and he said, "Hearken, behold, there went out a sower to sow. And it came to pass, as he sowed, some fell by the wayside, and the fowls of the air came and devoured it up. And some fell on stony ground, where it had not much earth, and immediately it sprang up, because it had no depth of earth. But when the sun was up, it was scorched, and because it had no root, it withered away. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no fruit. And other fell on good ground, and did yield fruit that sprang up, and increased, and brought forth, some 30, some 60, and some 100. And he said unto them, He that hath ears to hear, let him hear." We want to turn to the book of Galatians, the 6th chapter. Galatians 6, the 7th verse, 7th, 8th, and maybe 9th verse. It says, "Be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. For he that sows to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. But he that sows to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. And let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not." Okay? So these are the two scriptures we're going to talk about. So we're going to deal with the first one briefly, because remember, we're talking about success. The mindset, what you have to do to make sure that you are successful. Whatever you put your hands to do, you're going to be successful. So look at that story with the sower that sowed those seeds, and some seed fell by the wayside, some fell by earth that wasn't too deep, and some fell, amongst the thorns, and some fell in good ground. The thing is, it was the same seed, okay? And so the scripture doesn't give us to understand that in a particular place more seed was thrown. No, it was just the same seed. And depending on the ground, determined what the harvest, what the produce was going to be, what the prosperity was going to be of that seed. And so what I want to share is then, as we correlate this story to us today, we are the seed, okay? And what's important to determine what kind of harvest we are going to have is where we plant ourselves, okay? Now planting yourself, we are multifaceted people, okay? So your money is part of you, okay? Where you live is part of you. Where you work is part of you. Where you go to hang out is part of you. Your friends is part of you. All of this make up your environment, and all of these things reflect the soil in which you find yourself planted. So what I'm suggesting is that this particular set of scriptures is not talking about sowing a whole bunch of stuff. It's talking about that seed being us. And what's important is where we plant ourselves. And where we plant ourselves will determine what type harvest will be grown, will determine our prosperity. Now we go over to the book of Galatians then, the 6th chapter, starting in the 7th verse. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. It's talking about whatever it is you do, okay? However it is you function. And it's going on as far as speaking to how you do other men, and not to be weary of well-doing when you're looking at others that are prospering that are not doing so well-doing, okay? For you to continue, because in due season you will reap if you do not faint, if you faint not. That means if you don't stop. So recognize this then. The first category in the book of Mark, and I believe it's in Matthew and John as well, is about where we plant ourselves, okay? It's so important. I remember speaking to a gentleman once, and he worked for this car company, and he was in management, and he felt, he was kind of talking to me over lunch, talking about how the next day he was going to have to fire some people because they weren't very productive, and he was kind of giddy about it. He was kind of happy. And I'm like, because he thought he was doing a good thing. And I'm like, are you sure you want to do that? There is a concept called sowing and reaping. But he said, but they weren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not doing right. This is my job. Well, the question then is, does your job alleviate you from the ramifications of reaping what you've sown? Okay? and how many of us, even as human beings, are without ill? And even as believers, how many are relying on grace and mercy, undeserved grace and undeserved mercy? Yet you're kind of giddy about this gentleman that you're going to have to get rid of in the morning. Where's the grace? Where's the mercy? Well, it's my job, and these are the people I work. Okay, so if you were a hitman, and you had a revelation and epiphany, now you're trying to walk after Christ, and now you're still with with the organization, and the organization tells you to go bump off that guy over there. Are you exonerated in the eyes of God simply because this is your job? Or is your job that place where you've been planted, and that job where you've been planted is not going to be conducive to a good harvest or prosperity? Are you going to reap what you sow? What are you going to reap in that environment that you've planted yourself in? And then, as we see in Galatians, to do all good, do good to men. That's what sowing and reaping is about. So we've gotten this idea, and I understand that, because churches are in need of money, and sometimes the ministers are moved to pressure the people to give more. And so they take the scripture of sowing and reaping and use it solely as it pertains to finances. And what I'm suggesting is, speaking to people who are desperate for finances, to be digging deep in their pockets. I saw on TikTok or Instagram or something yesterday, this guy, he was calling himself an apostle, and he said he was in a hotel last night. This is before he was speaking this day. And God told him that if the people want to see miracles, 20 of them are going to have to give him a certain amount of money. I don't know how much it was, maybe $1,000. I don't know how much it was. But come on now, really? We have to come to a point where we have to start using wisdom. Now, Scripture tells us, if we're not wise, we should ask for it, right there. But some things just don't make sense, okay? Well, why would God be holding you hostage and expressing to you that your miracle is going to come only when you give this man $1,000? I thought God owned the cattle on 1,000 hills. What's he need to blackmail you for? So I'm just saying, as we begin to see these scriptures more sensibly, we recognize that these are for us. And it is our responsibility then. See, it's kind of easy if I think that the only thing I have to do is just throw money at this guy, and I'm going to be well. That doesn't put any pressure on me to begin doing the right things, to be living the right kind of way, to be treating people right. I feel, well, I've given this. I've done what I need to do, so I'll be well. But that doesn't fly, in the face of Scripture. Even in the church, where we're given to understand that the purpose of the church is the perfecting of the saints. Okay? If there's no challenge to me to be a better person, to try to do the right things, then how am I being perfected? Simply because I'm giving you this money and so my needs will somehow be met? No. This is why we're in the position today. Why are we poor? Why are the masses of church folks struggling and striving so hard to be well financially? To be well, educationally, to be well relationally, to be well, in their job, or just basic happiness. Because we are not being perfected. We've bought into the flesh, and that's what we're sowing into. Okay? So now this is the message, is how to make sure that everything we put our hand to do will be successful. So there is a place of accountability for us to be thinking and doing the right things and doing the right way. So the first thing you would need to do, because we'll get back to those scriptures in a minute, is to make a plan. You've heard the old saying, those who fail to plan to fail. Well, it's pretty true. Create a plan. And don't panic. Don't lament. Don't worry. Because these are the things that a plan helps eliminate. And if you take that time that you would be worrying and just put your mind and thought to creating a plan, that would eliminate some of that worry. And don't waste time. Because worrying is a waste of time. Don't waste time. Don't waste energy. Don't waste money. Don't waste anything. And work with what you have. We panic. Sometimes the vision is so large. Sometimes the thing that we need is so large. And what I'm suggesting is everything around you is available for you free of charge. Make sure you utilize everything you can that is within your reach. And, if the thing you're facing is so large, or even what you're trying to create is so large, in your planning, you have the big picture, but try to divide it down into sections, into smaller pieces, and begin looking at those smaller pieces more calmly. And even in those small pieces, figure out a plan. You might have to incrementally make this thing happen. But just don't panic. It's going to work out. Don't be deceived. God is not mocking. Do everybody right. Treat everybody right. This is number one, and this is what I don't understand with a lot of people. It's just doing. You want something to happen, and you're dealing with what you're believing is God. You're dealing with some favors that come upon you. Don't treat anybody wrong. Don't do anyone wrong. Okay? Because what goes around does come around. You do reap what you sow. That's what that scripture in Galatians says, to make sure and do right to all men. Don't do evil to them. That right there would clean up a lot of our issues, the attitudes that we have with folks. Sometimes if I'm facing something that I'm trying to accomplish that is like hanging in the balance, and I'm doing all that I can, I begin to check my life. Did I say something to make my wife mad at me? Did I do this person wrong? Have I left this undone? I make sure and get all those possibilities out of the way. Now, I'm not a perfect person, but at least at that particular time in my life, I'm going to be checking my life, checking myself, making sure that I'm not doing anybody wrong. Okay? That's very important. And so then after I have all of those in place, where I've made a plan, I'm not worrying, I'm not lamenting, I create contingency plans. Now this goes hand in hand with the not worrying part, okay? Because if you have a contingency plan, it's like, well, what's the worst thing that can happen to me? Now I know this might seem a little paranoid on my part, but we are who we are. I have a rental property that I keep a tenant on a month to month, just in case something happens. Now nothing's gonna happen. But I always have contingency plans. Cars, I have a couple of new cars, but I have like 3 used cars that I make sure and maintain, at least 2 of them, just in case. Just in case. So always have a contingency plan. So even when you're working on this large plan, now some folks will disagree with this. And maybe this is just my paranoia. I'm just a human being. But some folks say, just have no other plan, so you have to succeed. I think Sun Tzu was speaking once about, if you go into battle in a faraway land, once your troops hit the shore, burn the boats. That way there is no escape. They have nothing to do but to succeed. If I'm sparring somebody, that's okay. Back in the old days, I don't do that anymore. But as far as life and death, no. I'm going to have my boat still gassed up. I'm just going to fight as hard as I can, okay? So what I'm saying is I believe in having a contingency plan, because to me that takes away that edge, that takes away that terror, that takes away that negativity. Because for me, working in desperation, maybe you're fighting desperate in a fight, you might do better, I don't know. But as far as trying to come up with a plan, walk out a plan, and you're trying to walk by faith and not by sight, it's a lot easier to walk by faith and not by sight when you know that you're not going to be smashed if it's not going to work. And you might say, well, that's not faith. And I think it is kind of faith. As long as you're doing all you can do. See, a lot of times folks don't do all they can do, and that's a very important part of this. I look at sometimes people in the church that are waiting for a husband, that are waiting for a wife, and they're just waiting there. And so what are they doing while they're waiting? Well, they're just waiting and going to restaurants and eating and watching movies and not exercising, and they're just getting extremely out of shape. And that right there is going to reduce the marketability of that individual. So what I'm suggesting is if you're waiting for this man to manifest, or you're waiting for this woman to manifest, or you're waiting for a ministry to manifest, or a job to manifest, or whatever to manifest, be doing all that you can do. Go to school. Don't just sit around. Go to school. Improve yourself in the meantime. Exercise. Eat healthy in the meantime. Make sure that when the situation does finally resolve itself, that you are new and improved. Do everything you can, because what you're doing is you're making that out. You're pushing that outcome further out, because you're not doing what you can do with what you have available to you. Okay? It's very important. Don't waste time. Utilize everything you can. Take care of everything you can in the meantime. And I believe, and what I'm sharing with you today, is that it will, if you're doing all the things that you can do, that's within your reach, and you're being good to all people, and you have a plan plus a contingency plan, you're going to be all right. And let me give you this one little tidbit to throw in here. AI. You need to master AI. Become an expert at AI. I am. And I've only been using AI for a little over 2 years. Let me tell you how I came to realize the power of AI. Now I do my thing. I've been writing books since I graduated with my MBA back in about 2019 or so. And I've been doing the podcasts, and I've been doing the videos. I've still been on air. I've been doing all these things that I could do. But one day I was on the computer. I heard my wife in the other room, and she has a preschool. And she was sending an email to her employees, and she said she was using ChatGPT. And me, I'm like probably most people, what's that? Now, that's about 2.5 years ago. And she explained to me that she would just write this letter, the email that she's going to send her employees, and then she runs it through ChatGPT, and it perfects it. I'm like, what? I'd never heard of this. I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I had heard the name ChatGPT, but like most people, I didn't know. Man, that intrigued me right then. I wouldn't have signed up for it immediately. Because I saw, I had written at the time, I think I'd written about 5 or 7, maybe 8 books or so. And I used my sister, she was my proofreader, and and it was like a 2-week process for one book. Back and forth, change this, change that, change this. Man, ChatGPT, shoot, I figured I could take a manuscript and just run it through ChatGPT and say, just, proofread this and just correct all the errors. See, my sister, the PhD, had this way of like a school teacher writing in red or emailing in red all the things I needed to change. I'm like, why don't you just change them? I couldn't ask her to do that though. But shoot, GPT, but then what I had to do is I had to get the $20 version, the $20 a month version, because it was too much. I'd have a manuscript, that I had written that's maybe, I don't know, quite a few pages long, and maybe 9 pages long or something, and I would just copy and paste it and tell ChatGPT to proofread it and make any corrections necessary. And within like 7 to 8 seconds, it was done. Now, I'm talking about a process that was taking me 2 and 3 weeks to do with my sister. AI did it in about 8 seconds, okay? Imagine that. Man, I've written probably now about 25 books or so. That knocks that off. It makes it easy. It's easy for me to just type up a book, but I'm not. I could have all kinds of errors. Especially what I do is I do a program like on TV, and then I try to put the headphones on and just verbatim. You'd be surprised how this communication I'm having with you right now, if it's written verbatim, it would look ridiculous. You couldn't submit that. I just tell ChatGPT, fix it. And everything is fixed with the punctuation, paragraphs, everything. Man, I'm telling you. And that's just one aspect. I run things through ChatGPT all the time. Anything in life that I could come up with. A trust. I needed, my wife and I wanted a trust. ChatGPT. This is all the information. It just creates it. Anything you need, it creates. The only thing that I've done so many, I've struggled with, like IT things, issues with my computer, issues with a TV, issues, plumbing issues, but pool issues. I couldn't get the pump right as far as the timing and everything for my pool. It just wasn't working, and ChatGPT fixed it right then. Tell me exactly what to do. And the only limitation, I'm working on a plan right now. The only limitations we have with AI is not being able to come up with the right questions to ask, and just because the answers are there. And so whatever it is you're trying to do, so whatever it is you're putting your hand to do, be successful. Run it through AI. Just say, hey, this is who I am, this is what I like to do, this is what I'm trying to do, but I don't really know what to do. What should I do at this point? And be as clear as you can. AI will spit it out in like 10 seconds. I'm telling you, man. So this is the biggest one of the biggest roadblocks that we have is not having enough information, not knowing what to do, the next step, the right step, what to say, what not to say. The AI is like a tool there that's helping you. And I'd be surprised, or probably you wouldn't be surprised, but I'm surprised at how many people have issues with AI. Like I know a lot of smart people believe that AI is going to destroy the earth one day. I guess they watched iRobot with Will Smith, right? And often the resources that it's utilizing, the functional, it uses up a lot of water. So there's environmental issues. And so people are criticizing AI and not wanting to utilize it. But I'm suggesting this, that AI will be the very tool that whatever the environmental situation that it's creating, given the right set of circumstances and time, it will be AI that will give us the solution to fix the issues that AI is creating, okay? And I don't believe it's going to be a hazard to our world and to our life. I believe it's going to be beneficial, a beneficial tool. And so, but I've had a lot of pushback from a lot of people. It's going to destroy us one day. Too many movies like Star Trek, have to really eliminate the infection, or the virus, and humanity is the virus and all that kind of stuff. No, I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be like that. I think it's a great tool. It's a wonderful tool, and this is what's going to prosper us. Okay, but for right now, this is where we're at, and you just need to utilize it. Coming up. Now, as a young black man in America, or a black boy, and then a teenager, and then finally I joined the military at age 17. But I know you've probably heard this, especially if you're black, but even if you're not, that we were raised to believe that if you want, in this country, if you wanted to compete with a white person for the same job, you had to be 10 times better than that person. And you might say, and this is a true thing. This is what my daddy told me. This is what black kids were raised, being taught. And to see a picture of it in life, look at Obama. Obama was a brilliant man. And he completely intellectually dwarfed any of his opponents, whether they're in the Democratic primary or whether they were in the Republican general election between Republicans and Democrats. He was way brighter than any of them. That's why they couldn't defeat him. But then you could have somebody like George Bush, nice guy, but wasn't quite at the intellectual level. You could have the guy we got now, Donald Trump. Intellectually, not at the same level. But these guys didn't have the intellect of Barack Obama, but that intellect, if there was a black man at the same intellectual level as George Bush, or a black man at the same intellectual level as or even issues in life that Donald Trump has, never been president. Okay, so what I'm suggesting is now, that thing about being 10 times better than the white guy, well, that ball field has changed now. Everybody, if you recognize the power of AI, that's the 10 times better than. Whoever your competitor is going to be, no matter if they're white or black, no matter what race they are, no matter even what education level they are, if you have an experience in AI, you have that edge. And the problem is, if we sit around hating AI and not wanting to use it and all these reasons why we're negative against it, and our competitor is utilizing this tool, you lose. Okay? So whatever it is you're putting your hand to do to be successful, you want your business to be top notch. And you don't want to deny yourself of any tool that's going to help you get there, especially when you're competing with people who are embracing those tools, okay? And especially if you're competing for a job with someone. I'm telling you, even in an accounting job, like for me, I have an MBA, I might say, well, I'm still not too sure about my accounting skills. I'm a little rusty. It's been 2019 since I've been out. With AI, it doesn't matter, okay? You take whatever numbers you got, whatever company you're working for, run them through AI. AI will crunch them and kick them right out to you in about 9 seconds. Whatever it is you need. So that's a very big thing. So as we're looking down this list, there's nothing that's impossible. Just utilize the tools. Utilize integrity. Be good to all men. Recognizing, don't waste your time. Man, you're spending time in clubs and bars, you're wasting your time. That's not a good place to be sowing you into those environments. You need to be in positive environments. You need to be in positive environments are even in your off time, surrounding yourself with people with like-minded attitudes about life. People that are in the bars and the clubs just hanging out, those folks have issues. Otherwise, that's why they're in there. Whether they're married or single, they're in there getting drunk, they're just wasting time. Okay, I was speaking to an individual recently. And we were talking about drugs and alcohol, like weed and alcohol. Weed, particularly, for this, just to make this simple. And I think I'm an expert. I haven't been in that environment since I was 28 years old when I had my epiphany. And I'm like, I just turned 67 recently. So that's a lot of years. That's about 40 years ago. So I'm out of circulation, but I remember how good it was, okay? But let me tell you how detrimental it is. So I know we feel, well, it's okay to smoke weed, it's not really that harmful, and plus it's not as illegal as it used to be and all this stuff, but I'm telling you, how beneficial is it to your success? I could guarantee you this right now, if I had been when I went to school, I was 50 years old. I went to school for 10 years straight, night school, while I was working, while I was a dad, while I was a husband, while I was doing these programs. I had my plate full, and I was going to night school, and I went to school for 10 years straight. I missed a half a quarter in 10 years. I started when I was 50. I earned my associate's degree, then bachelor's degree, then MBA, graduated when I was 60 years old. I could tell you without a shadow of a doubt, I could not have accomplished that if I had been smoking weed. There's no way. There have been times I would have needed to study but didn't, and that would probably be the primary issue, but I would not have made it 10 years straight, missing just a half a quarter in 10 years if I had been smoking weed. It's just not going to work that way. And let me break it down to you. You might think it will. Let me break it down this way. So you take the 24 hours in a day, and how many of those hours in that day do you spend sleeping? Maybe 7 hours, okay? Okay, 7 hours in. How much time do you take getting ready, getting yourself together when you get up? Maybe have a little breakfast or whatever, showering, getting yourself together, and then driving and going to work. How much time does that take? Maybe an hour or so. Then you got a whole work day. You're spending at work. That's like 8 hours, but then travel time coming home, maybe 9 hours. So you've just spent, out of the 24-hour day, you've just spent 8 hours sleeping, 9 hours at work, 17, 18, the breakfast and the driving to and from work. And then you got, what? You got like 6 hours left in the 24-hour period. So you're going to get a buzz. So you're getting your buzz together. That might take you about a half hour to get there. And then you're going to be high maybe for about 2 hours. So you've already used 3 out of the 6 hours. Then after you're not high anymore, you're going to come down until you're not high anymore. That might be another hour or so. So you got 1 hour left. Where's the school in all that? Where is the success in all that? Where is putting your hand to do whatever it needs to be done for you to be successful? It's not happening. Weed is another environment, another soil that's unhealthy that you've planted yourself in. Okay? Sometimes you got to look at the situations just like that to break that down. You got no time to get that buzz. You got no time to party. You got no time to be going out with your friends, drinking and all this stuff, especially if you're younger. You need to take care of your business, especially younger in life, until you are established, until you have your finances down, until you have your business down, until you are thick with a foundation before you even think about partying. And once you get there, you're probably not going to be that party-minded. That party-mindedness is a carryover often from being a younger person, from high school into the job market, or from high school to college into the job market. You got to cut that stuff out. Let me give you a little, because it comes upon you to a point where you don't even realize that's what's impacting your success. That's what's giving you negative results, so it's not happening. That's why your money's jacked up. Man, when I stopped getting that buzz, I was 28 years old. I stopped getting that buzz in any way. So that was like, the buzz, that kind of buzz, was probably, back at the time, was about probably $60 every 2 weeks. I know that because I filled it in on my budget. Then alcohol, keep my alcohol cabinets full. You might put another $10 in there. I don't know, 15. I don't know what it is today, maybe 20. I went out every night of the week to the clubs, and I'm a good tipper. Man, I don't even know how much money I was spending, but out of all of that, think about how much, when I decided to become sober, how much money I was saving. So how was that adding to my prosperity? Very much so. Man, I came to a point when I wanted to buy that rental property. I was studying. I wasn't even in school yet. And I was a mailman on the mail route, and I was listening to an Audible book about how to buy bank-owned properties. I listened to that book for 2 days straight. Within 30 days, I had my bank-owned property. But what I needed $29,000 in cash. So if I went to and put a claim, or put in to buy a house that was a bank-owned property, one of the requirements was I had to have the ready cash, and I had to prove it. Okay. So if I was still getting that buzz and doing all those things that were sapping up my money, I wouldn't have been in a place to have this money that I could put in to purchase this rental property. I'm telling you, it's hard to see, but the soil, the environment that we've planted ourselves in is the very thing that are keeping us from being prosperous. And then when the preacher comes along and says you need some money, of course you do, because you've been blowing it all your life. Okay? Let me tell you how it sneaks up on you. Okay, I plant seeds. Every year I plant, because at 28, when I stopped doing that other stuff, I had to grow something, so I started growing vegetables. So I grow like tomatoes and cucumbers and peppers every year, and it's more like, I eat them, but it's more like for the fun of it, I love planting a seed and then watching it pop up in that little sprout, and then watching them take their own particular forms and all. So I grow that stuff. So this one particular year, I had planted all of my seeds. It was the early planting and all. And I had some tomato seeds left over. And I had been in the garage, and I noticed that right outside of the garage, in between my two garage doors, kind of in the driveway, but not in the driveway, was a planter that we had grown other things in, whatever kind of flowers my wife liked and all. But we hadn't used that planter probably in about 3 years. It had just been sitting there in that same place. It was a cool shape, but it was just sitting there with the same dirt in there that had been in that planter for years. And now we live, across the way, maybe about 100 yards, is a road. It's just like a two-way road, but it's a very well used road. But we have trees that are covering it. So that planter's been there with this dirt for like 3 years, kind of close to this road where traffic is going every day. But I had a handful of seeds, so I just dropped it in that planter, just for the fun of it. And I figured the rain would come, so I wouldn't even have to tend to that like I would my other stuff. And lo and behold, the sprouts came up, they grew up, and we had like these really nice cherry tomato plants coming up out of that planter. And what I like to do is after work often, I'd always just grab a handful of whatever I had growing, take it inside, wash it, and eat it. So this particular day, I came in, I think I went and checked the mail, so I was walking up the driveway. And I saw these cherry tomatoes on this plant in that old planter, so I just pulled about 5 of them off in my hand, like I always did. Went inside, rinsed them off, threw one in my mouth, bit down on it, and it was rancid. It was almost poisonous in taste. It was terrible. And of course I had to spit it out. And as it turned out, although that soil looked good, it wasn't good. Okay, it had been sitting out there. I don't know if it was poisoned by the traffic that had been driving by, or if it was just the age. I don't know what the reason was, but whatever reason, that soil was not good soil, okay? And it looked good. It looked like any other soil. And it got the rain, and it went through all the everything that you do with seeds to make them grow, and they came up looking perfect. So I'm suggesting that in our lives sometimes, the soil that we plant ourselves in, we don't even realize it until somebody like me comes up and tells you, you're in the wrong soil. That's what's wrong with you. Okay, so I'm saying just look around in your life. If you're hanging out in clubs and bars, that's the wrong soil. That's not conducive to a good harvest. That's conducive to hooking up with folks that have issues going on, which is why they need to deaden their mind anyway. They don't want to be thinking about reality. They're in there oftentimes running away from situations, running away from relationships, running away from marriages, running away from the previous relationship, not realizing that you found that previous relationship in this same soil that you're now looking for another one in. Come on now. I'm just saying. You really need to you want to be successful. Success is right there. It's right at your fingertips. But the sabotaging effort of the work of your hands is you too often. And so we just laid these things out, how you can be well. So let's go down. So let's run down them. Make sure we haven't missed anything. Okay, make a plan. We talked about that. Divide it into smaller parts if necessary. Don't panic. Don't panic. Don't lament. Don't waste that kind of time. Work with whatever you have. Take care of you in every way you can. I guess we did cover everything. And don't forget, you reap what you sow in both ways. Do good to all people. You'll reap that back. You'll reap the benefit, sort of in a spiritual way. And as well, the soil that you, the seed yourself, are being planted in. Make sure that soil is rich. Make sure that soil is healthy. And let me get back down, just before we close up here. No, you're not going to get away with this. Really take care of yourself. One of the ways in which you're taking care of yourself is your health, is your body. Man, when you are healthy, when you are exercising, and you are eating right, that's going to give you a positive self-image. That's going to give you motivation. That's going to give you a clarity of thought. You're going to be seeing things that you wouldn't have seen before, simply because your endorphins are kicking in. You got to address something. It's all going to be good. So what I would suggest is take this program, watch it again, and get what you can out of it. Because I guarantee you will be successful. Whatever you put your hand to do will be successful. You just got to take the right steps. How's that? Well, I guess I've bent your ear long enough, and I do thank you for listening to another perspective. And I want to invite you to listen again. You take care.